Welcome to the Culture and Sports Podcast, where we have discussions about how leadership and organizational culture impact organizational success, team and athlete performance, and the short and long-term mental, physical, and emotional health of athletes.
The Culture and Sports Podcast is brought to you by Culture and Sports.
Culture and Sports helps sports organizations, teams, coaches, support and front office staff, and athletes understand the importance of leadership and organizational culture and its direct impact on success. I'm Jeremy Piasecki, the Executive Director of Culture and Sports.
And I'm Sydney Moore, a former Division I volleyball player and CEO of Thrive Insights, a sports consulting firm. Please join us for Season 6 of the Culture and Sports Podcast.
Welcome back to the Culture and Sports Podcast. This episode is going to be dedicated to youth sports. And before we move on, I'd actually like to share, or for Sydney to share, what her thoughts were and some topics about this episode.
Yeah, so much of the season so far has been surrounded around college sports and even sometimes the step it takes to go play professionally. With me about to start my first professional volleyball season, I really wanted to take a step back and get back to the basics. I've been getting a lot of messages lately from parents or young athletes in sport, pre-high school is what I mean kind of by youth sports, who are asking me for my advice or asking about what my youth sports experience was or what decisions my parents made that I believe now made a big difference. And so I think this is a really great thing to talk about. And also, I think even if you're a college athlete right now listening to this, or you're an admin or a professional in the industry, looking back at your youth sports experience, I think can be a little bit healing, can be help you remember either, why you love the sport, or even help you understand why you have certain anxieties in the sport that you do. So that was kind of the hope, give some advice to the parents who have some younger athletes and give some clarity to those who've already gone through the experience.
No, thank you for sharing that. And one of the first things that you and I talked about before this episode was talking about, athletes, youth athletes, and especially parents and coaches of those athletes trying to specialize or having the athletes specialize early on. And one of the biggest things that I've seen, not only in my own coaching experience, was, and I'm sure you've seen it as well, and I saw it as an athlete, there's lots of injuries because of specialization. And what we mean by specialization is focusing on one sport too early. And I mean, there's a whole host of injuries that can happen. And I'm not even talking mental or emotional right now. I'm just talking physical. I mean, some things that come to mind are for baseball and softball, Little League elbow, which is like, shoulder and then elbow injuries for Little League elbow, or gymnastics. I mean, come on, wrists, backs, legs, knees, ankles. I'm sure if there's a podiatrist listening, they can name a bunch of more things as well. Soccer, you have ankle sprains, ACL or MCL tears. I mean, that's almost for any sport on land, right? Like knee injuries. And I'm sure you've seen your whole thing with this with volleyball, and I'm sure this goes along with basketball too, like ankle sprains, MCL, ACL tears, stress fractures, and so many other things from like jumping and pivoting. I definitely see that. And I could go on with just a list of injuries, physical injuries. But what did you see when you were a younger athlete? Just injuries themselves. And were you ever in a position where you felt like you were forced to specialize early on?
Yeah, I think the idea of specialization is really it's a product of so many different things that go into youth sports that I want to break those down. I mean, we'll talk about injury first, but there's also just the cost of it. There's the family aspect. There's the idea that going and playing in college or playing professionally, it's a very aspirational thing for parents. There's so many reasons why kids are being pushed to specialize, and then that specialization creates other issues. When it comes to injury, the main things that come to mind for me truly are just the stress fractures or stress injuries, and just the lack of full development of the body, right? Kids usually are expected to play, to be outside, to jump, to do the monkey bars, to do all these different things. if at a very young age you are afraid to try other things or to put your body in unique positions because of, your ability to play one particular sport, or you're constantly only, working the muscle groups related to a particular sport, I think we do a lot of athletes a disservice. There's also just the mental break of trying different things. And also just, you get to really understand actually what your favorite sport is. Like I did almost every sport under the sun before I chose basketball. And then I ultimately still tried another sport, volleyball, and that ended up being the thing that stuck. But when it comes to actually thinking about like my body and physical, I think the biggest way to tell that basketball and playing other sports growing up really did me was really great for me were there was two different things that I did overlap. So the first was while I was playing basketball from middle school up until like the middle of high school, I also did swim. And so my parents put me through like basic YMCA. Like I already knew how to swim, but like all the YMCA classes up to where you would be eligible for swim team. And there would definitely be moments where I would go from swim in the morning and then basketball in the end of the day, and I was gassed and I was tired. But that really did actually bring up my endurance, and I still think I have an ability to push through and have just some of that natural cardio, that natural cardio when I attack things, even if I'm not always in shape, because I know what it feels like to really push myself in that way. And then the second was having been a basketball player really helped me translate to volleyball, which ended up being my big sport. I was very fast, I was quick on my feet, I understood the basic idea of defense, which really relates to any sport. So you don't have to feel like your kid's not learning athletics and understanding competition just because they're not playing their main sport or the one you think that they'll play in college if that's what they choose to do. And I could definitely tell after 1 or 2 years of me not playing basketball and volleyball at the same time and having truly just been a volleyball player, I really did feel some of that natural quick agility, definitely my jump and different things like that slowing down. I now really have to work a lot harder to make sure that I'm staying in the same cardio shape and then the agility that I had when I first started playing volleyball. Those were things that were natural, and now they're things that I have to train artificially.
No, those are some great things you bring up. But I mean, I'm sure as an athlete yourself, you remember when you were doing multiple sports at once, you probably felt more comfortable, not only mentally, where you're like, oh, I've got this, I've been in this competitive situation before, but also the opportunity potentially to experiment in practice. Because you're like, oh, I did this in basketball. Could I use this pivot, or could I use something in order to move in volleyball, for example? I mean, I'm sure you've seen that because you already brought up cardio shape from when you did swimming and other sports. But every athlete I've ever coached was definitely more rounded as an athlete if they played more than one sport, especially when they play that one sport later and later. As a youth, and what I mean by youth is I would say probably anything 14, 15, and younger. If they were playing multiple sports, I think they just have a better mind for a game. Seeing the field would be a great example. Seeing the court, knowing where the ball is, even if you don't know, you're not even seeing it. It's not in view, but you just know where it is because you have so much experience in multiple sports. You know how to communicate with your teammates, whether it's visually or by voice or hand and arm signals, whatever you want to call it, or just knowing that your teammate's going to be there because you've been in that position so many times before, regardless of what sport it is. I mean, there's so many great things about playing multiple sports, and plus playing multiple sports. Sure, the athletes are more tired, they have less social time, they probably have less sleep time, less time to do their homework, but physical injury prevention is just way better with playing multiple sports, and the opportunities just to even just stretch. If you're not, stretching in one sport, you're probably, have a coach who's probably making you stretch in another sport. And there's just so many benefits for young athletes today to play more than one sport.
Yeah, and I recognize that there is potentially a socioeconomic thing here, which is both could be financial and could just be the makeup of your family. I grew up an only child. I was the only kid in the house, so everything that I wanted to do, I basically could do as long as my parents could leave work on time. And so that is also a stressor, and we can talk about that more for sure. And I don't mean, everyone is playing two sports worth of travel ball, right? I just mean I played travel sports, AAU basketball, and then I did swim on the side, or I took a dance class once a week, or different things like that. It doesn't always have to be super competitive in both, but also just being exposed to them. Even like summer camps and like different things like that, where you're just trying new things out. I think that pressure of being, letting go of the pressure and just being kind of a learner in different aspects of your life too can be really great. So for me, actually, volleyball originally was an outlet. Basketball was my main thing. It was a huge stressor for me, and going and playing volleyball was, like you said, a way to make friends at school, at my high school, before the year actually started, and a way for me to like move my body and get involved in something and get my mind out from basketball to experience and have fun in that physical way outside of the sport that I truly really cared about. From a youth perspective, one of my younger cousins, Uriah, how old is Uriah? 12, 13. He plays travel baseball very seriously. They live in Texas. It's crazy. He's had that baseball elbow and different things like you're talking about. But he also plays rec basketball like during the school year. And they make that a priority for him to be able to do something, even if it's only a 1 month season or something, just so that he's able to experience like the sports and the fun culture outside of a job. Because as a child, as it gets more competitive, it really does feel like a job.
No, and I mean, there's so many things you brought up that are so important. I mean, one of them you brought up was economic, right? I mean, back when, not to date myself, but back when I was a youth athlete, sports were way less expensive than they are today. Even if you're going to national events, or regional events, you still had to travel and you still had to get hotels and plane tickets or drive long distances and take time off of work and all those things. But I'm sure compared to today's dollars, especially with things like travel baseball, like you brought up, I mean, families are spending tens and tens of thousands of dollars, for a single yearly season of travel baseball, and that also shows where there's a huge gap in social and economic areas of the US where you have a lot of people who are the haves who have money to spend into things like travel baseball, or any travel sport, for that matter, and then you have communities that can't even afford to run a recreation league. So there's lots of differences, but in the instances of the underserved or not served communities, you also don't hear a lot of people talking about single sport injuries because youth athletes are playing a single sport for too long and they're too serious too early. And I'm not saying, oh, that's a great thing, right? But it's one of probably two or three positives for keeping sports simple, like they were meant to be for youth.
Yeah, I think too, you really do, I think, see that in certain sports. There's definitely stereotypes of like what a particular athlete of a sport might look like, and there's some sports that definitely are seen as, I don't know, higher earning or higher socioeconomic status, or you see certain pockets of the country or certain counties, even within a state, having, a higher performance in different sports than others. I think access to materials, especially, is a huge one, right? Like, why, or, I don't want to get in too much on like one sport, but I definitely think, because I don't have the facts to back it up, but I'll say like the stereotype of like basketball or soccer, like football, right? Soccer, football, like being a sport that's huge across the entire world, is because what do you really need to be able to practice and play soccer? You need a ball. It doesn't even really need to be grippy because you're using your feet. You can use, people or a tree or whatever to resemble a goal. Whereas volleyball, to get that time to be able to play and to have, it's a very specific skill sport. You have to get used to the actual distance and everything of where you are. You need that net. You need it at a particular height. You want it to be, tight. You need the space, and understanding the dimensions of a court. It's very difficult to get access to a volleyball court, or lacrosse, where the sticks can be $200, $300, or tennis, or all these different things where it requires more resources and things like that. So I think that's a huge thing to recognize. And that's also, right, like a reason why parents choose to specialize. And so it's like, I don't, we talk about this, the thought really is having just a conversation on it rather than telling people one exact thing. Because I do recognize like, hey, if I had a sibling growing up that also wanted to play a sport, my extra time, the budget that I had for my extra sport or dance or whatever would go to my siblings one activity, right? So that's definitely something people have to say. But the last thing I'll say, and I want to hear what you have to say, is that cost and the rising cost, I think, really adds to a little bit of this like professionalization and this extra pressure to play. I think in the past, yes, if you were really great or that was something that you really wanted to do, people knew there was an opportunity to go play in college and then eventually go pro. But I think the media attention and this like new thing about how cool it is to go in college has made it more likely for parents to kind of speak that earlier or even to use that opportunity that they might be able to get a scholarship for their child as a reason, as a way to offset the cost. I feel like it's something that comes up. I'm not a parent, but it's definitely come up to me and people have brought up to me as I coach, privates and stuff. Hey, what's the possibility of her getting a scholarship? I'm trying to figure out how much we can budget for privates and lessons versus how much we might just put into a savings account.
No, and that's a great thing you bring up for a variety of reasons. The first is if you really take a step back and you look at over a lifetime for a youth athlete that specializes in one sport for a long period of time, I'm pretty sure that the parents are spending way more, for those years of the youth athlete participating in that single sport, for travel purposes, than they would if they were just putting in that money into a savings account for education. Okay, so that's the first thing to think about. Again, we're talking about more affluent families. We're not talking about families in underserved or not served communities, because something like that would be a dream to have a choice like that, right? And so we just need to be cognizant of that privilege, as we're discussing this. The other thing to really think about is the amount of money and time that parents have invested or other family members have invested, and all of a sudden you have a kid who's 12, 13, 14, who all of a sudden is like, I really don't want to play basketball anymore, I don't want to play travel baseball anymore, I just want to hang out with my friends, I just want to be in my room and sleep all day. I don't want these pressures that are being put on me anymore. And then all of a sudden the families are looking at the time and financial commitments they've already made in the past, and are they either directly or indirectly pressuring their child or their family member to continue in that sport because of what's been invested into, whether it's that single child in the single sport or if it's just each child in each sport. And that's just something really to think about as parents who are listening, is what kind of undue pressure, whether it's direct or indirect, are you putting on your child that you're not even realizing you're doing because of what you've already invested into them.
That's great. I'll add one thing that I remember from my time is that I asked to play travel sports. When I got to a point like with basketball, I always say I feel like I got burnt out. I was playing on too many teams for too long and just was in environments that were too competitive for where my love and mindset for the sport was. And I always, when we look back, my parents are like, "Oh, we wish we knew, like we would have changed it, but you really wanted to do it." And so it's like that's where I would say, and my parents were great about it, but I mean, everyone has their things, but it was like they would ask each season, "Are you sure you want to do this twice?" I'm like, "Yes, I have to do it." My reasoning for I have to do it and I want to do it was intrinsic and extrinsic. I did like playing basketball. I did like my life in general as a happy kid. I did want to play in college. But that was the intrinsic motivation, but it was also extrinsic where it was I felt like this specific team is the one I want to play for because this is the one that's cool. This is the one that's gonna, get me to the college I think I should go to be cool. Or, the phrasing, which we've talked about in the mental health episode, the phrasing around what makes you a good athlete and the competitiveness and all of that may be influencing the way your child talks and acts around the sport. So like just because they're excited and all of that, I still would urge parents and coaches and different things to really make sure that they're understanding the why of their kids' statements and excitement around the sport, and that they're doing that, right? So like I have had kids before kind of make jokes, or like I'd be like, "Oh, like if you're not the best team, you're not good. If you didn't win, you're not good." And I had to be like, "That's not true. Like, I play in the best conference, in one of the best volleyball conferences in the country. My team didn't do well, but we're a very good team. Put us in a different conference and we'll win, right? Like, hey, we played, 5 top 25 teams in a row. We didn't win, but that doesn't make us that we're bad players." And so I think those are just the kinds of things that might just seem as confidence and this like sturdiness, and oh, my kid's really ready to go D1 or whatever, but also that those are things that you have to make sure, hey, when they do lose, do you actually believe that? Do you understand that we love you? Are you sharing that you're proud of them other than their accomplishments on the court, field, even in the classroom? I think those are things that um, we get the sports world emphasizes so much that we miss some of those actual messages that the kids are getting.
No, exactly. And another thing I was thinking about while we're talking about just pressuring, kids and youth sports today is think of some of the athletes who, both men and women in the past, that weren't really good in their sport, or they just weren't on a meteoric rise, growth wise, towards, doing things professionally or even collegiately. I mean, Michael Jordan is a perfect example, right? Like, he didn't even make his high school varsity team as a sophomore in high school or a freshman in high school. Both of them. I mean, Serena Williams, in the World Tennis Association, if I recall correctly, like, she was okay in junior tennis, but it was later when she reached her success. And then you have, um, you know, Tom Brady. We could use him as an example as well. I mean, colleges weren't, banging down his door to be like, hey, we want you at, the best schools in the country, because he wasn't great, earlier in his high school or youth career. He developed later. And so just because we're putting all this time and effort into the youth athletes, doesn't mean that that return is going to be there later. And we're not even talking about like injuries or burnout or anything like that. We're just solely talking about development of an athlete. And I mean, people are growing, right? Like, you might have all sorts of coordination when you're younger, and then all of a sudden you're growing, all of a sudden your coordination isn't there, or maybe your muscles don't grow the way that they were before in your body, and you're just not able to do things you were able to do before. Sometimes you're super short, then you're super tall, and you just don't know how to function in the same way where you were super competitive before. Those are all things to really think about. Just because, my child is great at soccer at 6 or 8 years old doesn't mean that I should be automatically putting them in a high performance pipeline at that time, because there's so many things that can happen between them being young and then them even getting to high school, let alone potentially college, playing in college or playing professionally.
I think understanding the same way I mean, I preach it all the time, like take an inner look, right? Understand who are my parents, like especially my mom always talks about understanding who I am. Every time I would change teams, choose
Exactly.
schools, when I chose Syracuse, now with my professional, like she's always bringing up, hey, I don't know if that would be a good locker room for you. Or, hey, I know that this coach seems really great and people love them and they're very charismatic, but I don't actually know if this is the one that this is the coach that would connect best with you, right? And so I think understanding that about your kid too, like if your kid is amazing at soccer from a young age and loves it, is insane about it, and is always doing it, then by all means, like keep them in it, keep going, and just and monitor. Hey, at that point, it's monitoring. Hey, are we doing too much of this one skill? Are they really just great at this one particular aspect of the sport, and that's all the elite teams are only bringing them on to do that? Or are you rising up? Like, are you raising up all of their other skills so then they can be an overall all great player, right? So in college, like going into college during my recruiting process, I was one of the volleyball players where you could actually commit before your sophomore year. So most of my class of volleyball athletes were that were played Power Four, Power Five, were already committed by the time we were freshmen or sophomores in high school, or were very close to. There were a large number of girls that actually committed in middle school, believe it or not, which is like really crazy to see now. And there was actually a very large number of them who were either dropped by the school or decommitted because either the school saw them again and felt like, hey, you're not actually not as developed as we thought you were. There's another girl who we didn't know about when we committed you that is at a higher level or we think is a better fit, both sports and just personality. Like, how do you know what someone's personality is going to be 13 versus 18? Or people like me, I mean, no one decommitted anyone to take me on, but people like me didn't even play the sport when these girls were committing, right? So things change a lot. And at the same time, there were also a lot of athletes who decommitted or changed their decision because they recognized what they actually wanted from the sport. So when they were in eighth grade, hey, the top school in the Big Ten seems like a great idea. But then get through high school and they did other clubs and they did other activities and they decide, hey, I actually don't think I want volleyball to be the only thing that I do for my whole college experience. And I think that depending on your family situation can also be a hard thing, right? There are people who do make it their point to say, okay, I'm going to use college athletics to help me pay for college. In general, unless sometimes those people also, and I know that my mom was one of them, my dad was one of them. And sometimes those people's ultimate dream is to play professionally, but a lot of the time the other part of that is making sure that you're getting a good degree, that you're able to use your education, you're able to set yourself up for life later. So I think that's another part of it is like, hey, we want you to get this scholarship, but these are all the other things that happen. It's not just the athletic performance.
No, that's 100% true. And earlier you brought up about coaches and being able to work with coaches well. Um, as an athlete myself, both when I was young and when I was a little bit older playing professionally, I did have trouble multiple times gelling with the coaches and understanding truly what they were trying to accomplish. And back in my days, there was a lot more hazing and it was a lot more acceptable and not really enjoying that. But as a coach too, there are times where I know I couldn't reach certain athletes. And it wasn't that I wasn't trying enough or the athlete wasn't trying hard enough. It was just sometimes the way people are, they just don't gel together. Or, maybe the way that I think through things as a coach isn't necessarily how the athlete learns. And so, if you have 20 athletes on a team and you're trying to find 20 different ways to reach that athlete, sometimes it's a little bit trying. And sometimes you don't even know how to reach that athlete. No matter what you do, who you talk to, what you try to change. And so, that's really difficult for athletes. And all of a sudden, you have them on this travel team or you have the athletes on this great team but they're not gelling well with the coach. So what's going to happen with them mentally, emotionally, or even physically? Like what if, the coach is a super old school coach and is training the athletes until breaking point. And so, and these are youth athletes, that shouldn't be thought about at all. And the other thing I was thinking about earlier, and I have this conversation all the time with like coaches or especially with parents or even youth athletes, a lot of, people are in a rush to go join that best team. And I tell them simply this: do you think that your athlete is going to be better if they're on a great team, but always ride the bench, when it comes to game time situations, or if they're on a not so good team and they're playing all the time, whether it's the majority of the game or if there's, barely enough athletes to field a team where they're playing the whole game? Do you think mentally and emotionally that they will benefit more from more game time situations than less game time situations? Because that's where all the learning happens, because you train. And as a coach, you're trying to set up the athletes in the best game day situations problem as possible, but it's not the same as actually showing up on the court or in the pool or on the pitch or somewhere else where all of a sudden everything changes and there's stress and the butterflies and those things. And you can't give that to them in practice, especially if they're riding the bench and they're always riding the bench. And then if you give them that opportunity to actually play, and this is really true in places like travel baseball, all of a sudden a kid who hasn't played all year in a game because they've been sitting the bench, all of a sudden the coach calls them in and they're at bat. Do you think that he or she is all of a sudden going to be super excited and is going to, launch a ball into the bleachers? Or do you think that they're going to be scared about making a mistake? And that's what they're going to be focused on. And then it's going to become a negative experience. And they're going to try to overcome the negative thought experience. That's what I mean by negative experience. They're going to try to overcome that negative thought experience for days, weeks, or months ahead. And it may not be reversible because they're rarely in a game time situation.
So I have a little bit of a hot take on this actually, from my own personal experience. Again, I think it depends on the player. I think it depends on the coach,
Definitely.
and I think it depends on the goal. So when if you are in a program that doesn't have a lot of national recognition. So let's say, like, again, I can really speak from volleyball. Volleyball has regions that naturally just get a lot of recognition. Any club or high school that you play for in San Diego, in many areas of Texas, in Florida, you will get attention. So whether you're playing for the best club or the worst club, coaches are naturally just going to add those kind of girls to their list. They kind of
Right.
have an understanding of how they train. So if it's between in like a top, super high region, you've been there for a while, you've been trained, the top team versus a lower team, but you're still going to get looks, you're still going to get seen, then yeah, maybe go for the one that you'll have that for. But at the same time, if you're someone like me, so like for me, I played for the top league, the top team in my region, the ones team, one of the best clubs. And I never played. Like really, really rarely ever played. But I had a coach who taught everyone regardless, that was very honest about the fact that I would not play, but gave me true feedback in practice. And because I was playing on the top team, I was constantly training with the best girls. And our practices were set around playing. So it wasn't just skills. I still got that true like scrimmage material. And by the way of being on that team, coaches were naturally more willing to look at my film when I did have game film, or when I did finally go to high school and was able and played in the high school season. So it's like kind of, what is your goal there? There's a little bit of delayed gratification. But that was when I was 17 and it was go time on, I need to get recruited, I need to get seen, I need to add some legitimacy in the volleyball world, and I need to get better fast. My 16's year, the year before we moved to California, I played for a club that wasn't maybe necessarily like the most famous club in the country and whatever, and it was best. But I played there and I got playing time. We chose what is the team that's going to give me playing time. I got potential I could play up, but I wouldn't really play. But it was going to be really strong competition, like I had at the other one. But this one, I was like, I just needed to play. And so every time in the other one, right, like when I was down, when I got to a higher level and I felt down, I was able to look back at this experience as the player, like you're saying, and know, okay, I can do this. So I think it really does depend on who you are like who your kid is or who the athlete is. Like, are you able to handle that humility? Are you able to rise up to the occasion, understanding that you're not necessarily the big dog? Is the coach someone who truly coaches, or do they only coach their starters, like you just said?
Exactly.
And what is the situation? Like, right? Like, is it senior year and your kid's not committed? Or do they have some time to grow and develop?
Well, and that's where I was making the generalization.
Yeah.
Was, if you're an 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 year old, should you be sitting on the bench for all those years with the one potential opportunity to play? Or
Yeah.
should you be on a team that's better suited to giving you game time experience? Because I mean, just think of it from the mental emotional standpoint. And I'm not talking about sitting on the bench and watching all of your peers playing except for you. And that is a whole separate issue to talk about with, you know, therapists and mental health professionals and talk about that. But I'm just talking about sheer understanding of game or sports in general is if you're out there in game experiences when you're a very young athlete, that should be done. And that's why rec sports are so awesome, is because the whole point is for everyone to play and to try to give them semi equal playing time, just so they can get out there and experience it. But then if you're playing sports like travel baseball from an early age and you have a 7 or 8 year old that you want them to be the starting pitcher of the Yankees, when they're getting selected for the draft when they're 18, but right now they're 7 or 8. um is that really the best opportunity for any child? You were in a little bit different situation. You were 16 years old. You were looking at what your abilities were, what you wanted, what your goals were, and then also what you would be okay or not okay with, because the coach you talked to was very uh open in their communication to you, and they probably said something to the effect of, we would love to have you on board. We will teach you as much as possible, but you getting playing time, fulfilling playing time on this team may not be possible. But we will do everything to get you out there and show you to college coaches to help get you committed to a school, and we will help you to become the best volleyball player possible. And in their brains, they were probably like, yes, we could do this. We've done this before. And you as the athlete were like, that makes sense. That makes sense. I want to start playing at a higher level. But in in theory, a 7 or 8 year old or a 10 or 11 year old is thinking like, oh yeah, I want to play on the best team possible. Of course they probably do, but they don't realize the second and third order impacts of that and how it might impact them not only short term but really long term as well.
Yeah, I look back to this is just something like parents that I always think about, like, and that people don't often say is yeah, when you're on those teams and you're not playing, when there is team success, sometimes it's hard to accept it as your own. Like, I know everyone says, oh, everyone contributed, everyone gets a ring. But I look back at like that first state championship and I'm like, I don't feel like that was mine. I don't feel like I contributed to that. And I think that's just something that I would flag again to parents or the support system of athletes, like, as things happen. The other piece I want to talk about that of like choosing teams is um like as a black girl or like as a woman athlete in general. I think also understanding the makeup of the teams and the understanding of the program and where you're in. I know that this can be especially difficult in certain pockets of the country where things or people aren't as diverse, or you're not in a more metropolitan area. Like, I'm in San Diego. I played in New York City. I played in North Jersey. Like, there's definitely issues and things that come up, but not as strong as the things that I've heard in my DMs as I post more. And so again, I say, again, it's all about what the temperament of your child, what's the conversation that you have at home, and like what's the basis that you've given them, and like what's the ultimate goal. I think when you're in youth sports, like, yeah, you should have coaches, teammates, people around you who really want you to be there and who are really invested in your development. You don't want at 10 years old, 11 years old to feel like people don't want you because of blank thing about your identity. But as you get older, sometimes I think that this is like, I guess for parents as they choose, like sometimes that does happen. Like sometimes, as when I'm a parent and I have a kid, like my first I original idea is I want to make sure that there's another black girl on the team for my kid or a black guy, boy on this team, or like if the coach, right? But if that doesn't happen in the city we live in, does that mean my kid won't be able to play basketball? Right? So I think like managing that, and then it's like, okay, if there isn't someone on the team that represents our identity or respects it or I feel trusted, what are the protective factors that I'll put up around them to make sure when they leave that I know what's being said or I can counteract that thing. Like everyone on the cheer team is doing their hair a special way, and my daughter can't quickly just do her hair like that. Like just like telling her that that's okay. I think that's something that my parents did really, really well. And Again, I'm just thinking of instances that come up. Like, this is something that comes up. I think it's come up maybe 4 times in the last year, conversations with parents or with athletes who had that experience.
Well, I would venture to say, uh, along the lines with what you're saying here, is I think in rec sports, it's probably a little more reflective of the social composition um, of the community,
Yeah.
and so you're probably going to find similar people that you identify with as a child or a youth athlete in general, like, oh, I know this kid from school, or oh, this person looks like me and they're so good, or whatever the case may be. But I think on, more serious teams, you might not find that. And I think the first thing that comes to mind is not social or cultural. I think it's financial, right? That's the first thing on a travel team is, well, do you have money to contribute? And if not, can you help us find money, to not only pay for your athlete, but for other athletes? And so, and I think financial is that first step. And so, is it really reflective of the local community, or is it reflective of the community that you want to live in a vacuum with, and you want to play in a vacuum with? And I, I so I struggle with this being a white male, and obviously now I'm a white middle-aged ish male. But both my kids were not white, and so there were things that when I was playing, I was just trying to, fit into my local community. Even though I was a little bit younger, and my accent was different, whatever the case may be, and I had way different and smaller issues than both of my children did going through sports, because it was a lot different for them because they had all of those extra things to worry about. And a lot of those things, it took me a while to start thinking about, is why, why does my child not want to go, to practice with this team? Is it because they don't like the sport? Is it because they don't like the other athletes? Is it because they don't like the coaches and the parents? What's being said to them? And those are the things that you have to think through. And going from a team that doesn't necessarily reflect your community to a team that is, or a team that does reflect your community, and then going to a travel team or just a higher level team that does not reflect your community, that's really hard sometimes, for youth athletes. And I think it sets up potentially a negative connotation, especially for younger athletes. But again, like with you, you were a little bit older when you took that step up. But what if that was the case 6 or 8 or 10 years earlier? Would you have made the choice for the same reasons? I don't think you would have, because you don't really have the life experience at 6, 8, 10 years old, 12 years old to really make those decisions.
Yeah, and it makes it difficult, right? It's like I can't like I'm thinking like, hey, like I I really want to play this thing and I live in a small town, or I have siblings and my parents can't be driving me 30 plus minutes to a different town or a different area to be able to play on the team that would be perfect for me. But this is my ultimate goal and like what I really want to do and I'm passionate about. How do you make that decision of like, okay, physically I can be there and I can work through this, but we know that sports are so mental, and especially for team sports, like that matters so much. Like I honestly, I wouldn't even say regardless of level, in a team sport, your ability to mesh with the other players on the court affects your entire experience. Your own excitement and happiness being there, but also your ability to play and be seen as someone on the court. Honestly, even I would say in a rec sport where everyone has, 10 minutes of the game to play, right? Like that matters a lot. And so managing that experience and making sure that you're not, like you're saying, like you're not mixing up distaste for the sport with distaste for the position that you're in, and that you're filling your cup or filling your kid's cup in other ways. I love that we're talking about this rec and this thing, right? Too, right? We're talking about now, like, hey, all the different levels of sport that you can participate in. A couple episodes ago, you asked me if I think kids should receive participation trophies. And we all know what I said. If you haven't watch the episode, but I want to ask you, what is the I don't know. I just want to figure out what is the appropriate level of competition at different ages.
Goes back to what you were saying. What is it that uh, you want as an athlete? And obviously, as a super young athlete, um, you don't know what that is. And so, if you're loving the sport, and you want to continue to perform at higher levels and compete at higher levels, I think that's a good thing. I was just talking to a youth travel baseball player this past weekend who's in middle school. And, his mom was talking to me about, how her son is struggling. And I asked her, well, does he love playing baseball? And she said yes. And then I asked her, the follow-on question is, or does he love that you love baseball so much and you have enjoyment watching him play it and that's why he loves it? And she was like, I don't know that answer. And so I talked to the athlete for a couple minutes and I asked him the same questions and he was like, yes, I love baseball, I love everything about it. And I said, but you know, do you truly love it or do you love it that your parents love it and they're so excited to see you succeed in that sport? And he didn't know which love he had either. And I think that's very difficult. So but going back to what we are talking about earlier, yes, I think at younger ages, rec sports are fine for everyone because you're learning about the sport in general and the love of sports in general. And I think that sports, whether it's a team sport or an individual sport where you train with the team, it's great socially. You learn a lot of things, especially as an only child. Like you learn a lot of social things, like you do at school. You build a lot of friendships. You could even live through trauma together. Not that that's a great positive thing, but you do encounter adversity and you do help each other overcome that adversity, right? And you learn resiliency and you learn a lot of skills. And if you're playing at those higher levels, are those teams set up and are the groups of parents at the same position that you and your family are at? And I think sometimes that's a little bit skewed when it comes to higher level teams or travel teams. And for me, rec sports were enough as a parent for our children until our children were like, no, I want to play at a higher level. I would like to achieve this. And then, well, how are we going to do that if a rec season is 6 to 8 weeks long? So then we start looking at those other things. But I think the lead, sometimes needs to come from the athlete because as a parent, you're like, yes, I want my child to be picked up in the MLB draft when they're a senior in high school and they're are they going to go to college or are they just going to go in the draft and then start playing for the minor league team for 10 seconds and then they're starting for the Dodgers. I mean, yes, you want that for your child, but do they want that? And I think learning and loving the game that they're playing, learning and loving the team that they have, and learning and loving about sports in general, like lifelong love of sports, I think is the most important at younger ages.
Yeah.
And I think adults just really mess that up.
The aspiration for parents that your kid is going to go pro is so interesting to me. I think obviously everyone says it. Again, I'm not a parent, so I'm sure there's things that I've said here people are like, just Sydney, you wait. But yeah, like I know everyone thinks their kid's gonna like win a Nobel Peace Prize one day, right? And but it's so maybe because both of my parents, one of my mom was pro, my dad played semi-pro, like both were elite athletes for until they couldn't do it anymore. That was not an expectation or like a general hope that they had for me. They understood what it might take, and as I showed qualities that showed that that could happen, they supported that and they got more excited for me. But it wasn't ever something that came up like, oh, when you go play pro, or oh, you're gonna do this, like. And I feel like that's something that comes up a lot in youth conversations. Even like I had a parent recently ask me over TikTok, like had found a video, how many lessons will it take, for my daughter to become a pro like you? And I'm like, do you really understand like sports and like the athlete, like what all goes into that, right? Like you can't, like there's so like I could give her a lesson every day for 10 years. If she doesn't love it and doesn't want it, then that, and and they hadn't, and the daughter actually hadn't even played volleyball yet, so that was like its own thing. Um, so the idea that parents like with the pro is interesting. I think it's really reflective as well of like how much we value professional athletics over other things that are also very important, right? Like in the same way that you're talking about your kid going pro one day, are you also really encouraging them that they could do other things like academically and all these things? Like I talked about it with like people saying, "Oh, like sports is going to be my way out." I had a podcast guest a couple of days ago. Episode will come out eventually. Like I said, do you feel as much as people told you you could use football to go out to make it out? Did people tell you that you could get a perfect score on your SAT? Or get a really great merit scholarship, or that Ivy League universities are totally need based, and that if you had a certain score and did some extracurriculars that you probably could get in and have it completely paid for? Like, is that something that people are also encouraging? Um, I loved what, and then the last thing I'll say is like, I loved what you said about like the lesson and love of sport. That's another huge thing that I think gets mixed into the competitiveness part. Even just playing rec, you can learn some competitiveness. You learn you either won or you didn't win. You learn how to be a teammate. You learn how to be humble if you're and recognize your own ability. You either made the shot or you didn't. There's no way to hide that, right? Like, so you don't necessarily have to be extremely competitive to learn some of those basic things of sport, which I think is important. And I really wish that there were more rec opportunities as we got older. When I was in high school, I played volleyball because I wanted to try and do something new. Volleyball ended up sticking. My high school was ridiculously great at all of its sports. I really wanted to be on the swim team. Like I was like, okay, I'll do volleyball this year. Maybe sophomore year I can try the swim team, and basketball will always be the main thing I did. But I never got to do swim in New Jersey or in California because the swim teams were incredibly competitive for both. You needed to already have been in travel or AAU or club swim to even make the freshman team. And the seasons like overturned with each other. I couldn't do that. I literally could not have done basketball and swim at my high school. They wouldn't allow you to register in both. And there's so many people I think who would, as they get older, even in high school, it's not exactly, I would say this part, the youth sport kind of maybe just goes into not super elite competitive sport or college sport, that would want to compete and would want to participate and have fun with sports, who literally don't have the opportunity because now we've made even the lowest level freshman sport, like freshman team, that's supposed to just be fun and make friends. We've even made that a feeder for the pros.
Exactly. And then on top of that, you have club programs that are just feeder into high school programs. And if your
Yeah.
child's not participating into that feeder program because they're at a different club or they're just playing rec sports, whatever the case would be, then they might not even be able to join the team in high school. And those, there are so many different things to think about. And one of the things we didn't get to today, and we just don't have the time, is talking about social media exposure and NIL
Yeah.
for youth athletes. And that's, I mean, we could do so many episodes just on that. But I did want to end this episode with a closing thought for each of us, and I'll go first, just so you have a moment to think about yours. But um, I'm just going to explain something or share something, and it's not necessarily applicable to sports, but I think most listeners and viewers will understand what I'm saying. So back when I was in the military, which I was in the military for a long time, I'd have parents all the time of family friends that would reach out and be like, "Oh, my child wants to, my child wants to join in the military, or they need to go in the military, or whatever the case may be. They don't have a direction. They're in their late teens, early 20s, mid 20s. What should we do?" And my first response to them is, well, what do they love to do? And then of course the parent never knows. But the most important thing that I share with them is, if they're not the ones calling me, why are we even having this conversation? If you're going to force them, whether it's a younger child who's a senior in high school, maybe they're 17, maybe they're 18, or if they're a young adult, whatever the case may be, do you really want to force your child into a situation that they don't necessarily want to be in? And the military has consequences. If you decide you don't want to be in the military anymore and you leave, guess where you're going to get thrown? You're going to get thrown in the brig. you're not going to just get benched. You're going to get thrown in the brig. You're going to potentially get a dishonorable discharge, and then, or an other than honorable discharge. And then you're going to have to go fight, for jobs and opportunities because you have a other than honorable discharge. I mean, and maybe you even serve some jail time because you weren't ready to do it. And so that's where I leave a lot of parents with youth sports. Are you going to impact their lifelong love of sports by bringing them up to levels that they're not necessarily mentally, physically, or emotionally ready yet? And the second thing is what does the athlete really want when it comes to sports, and what kind of sports environment do you want to provide to them? And it's the same thing for education. Do you really want to put them in AP classes if they're struggling to just pass regular classes? There's lots of things to think about as parents, and it's not just sports, or it's not just school. There's like social repercussions, there's financial repercussions. It's so difficult being a parent, and I have two adult children now, so I've made it through that phase. But I know a lot of parents struggle, and they just want to do the right thing for their children. They want to give their children opportunities that they didn't necessarily get. And my parents did that for me, and I did that for my children. And I know that those youth athletes, when they become adults and parents, they will do the same thing. But we just have to be cognizant of what we're trying to force onto them. And are they going to be mentally, physically, and emotionally prepared for that? Or are they going to walk away with a mental, physical, or emotional injury?
I think there are so many benefits to sports, and it's really, really cool to be an athlete. Like there's financial upsides, there's popularity and coolness factors. There's so many cool things that go into being an athlete. But at the end of the day, they are meant to be fun. It's meant to be entertaining for the player and for the fans, for everyone involved. It's an entertainment industry, even if it's not televised. Even rec sports are an entertainment industry. But for you to enjoy all of those benefits, there's downsides, there's negatives, there's hard times, there's all of these different things that you have to do physically, emotionally, financially, all of that. You want it to be worth it. And for it to be worth it, it needs to be fun. So regardless of what I think a lot of times these decisions are family goals. My family, we went to Cornell. We played volleyball at Syracuse. I physically did it, but it was a family and a village
Exactly.
sport. And so for it to be worth it for your family and for your village, it needs to be fun. So if your goal for your child, or your child's goal, your family goal is, we want you to get a scholarship because we don't feel like we could pay for this, or we want you to get into a school that we don't know if you would have gotten into on otherwise, or we would have paid for otherwise, or we want you to play professionally, whatever the reason is, there has to be some love or some kind of like thing that makes it worth it. And I think what the easiest way to make it worth it is loving it. So choosing the right program for you, choosing somewhere that you're going to be successful, whether it's for the fun and the glory of being a professional athlete and being the coolest person in the world, or literally just to get your degree, you're going to need some kind of why to get you through the high school season, the college season, the professional season, and those however many years of doing it. So you need to make sure that that why is really strong and that you're fueling the why with the right environment. That's a wrap for this week's episode of the Culture and Sports Podcast.
We hope this episode has started an internal dialogue, or even one with your team, about the importance and impact of leadership and organizational culture.
This episode of the Culture and Sports Podcast was produced by Sydney Moore and Dr. Jeremy Piasecki. Music by Chase Griffin.
If you'd like to learn more about culture and sports, the Culture and Sports Podcast, or our other programs, go to cultureandsports.com, where there's a wealth of resources, articles, research, podcasts, video shows, webinars, and courses.
Or you can connect with us on all social media platforms at Culture and Sports. Thank you for tuning in to the Culture and Sports Podcast.